I never planned on becoming the center of an alien empire's attention. I was just trying not to die in the middle of a collapsing fortress when I stumbled on her. The air was thick with smoke, beams crashing down, alarms howling through the structure, and I could barely see 3 meters ahead. I'd been separated from my unit, armed with nothing but a half-dead flashlight and my stubborn refusal to quit. That's when I saw her. She wasn't hard to miss. A tall figure in regal armor pinned under a mangled support beam, silver and crimson fabric shredded and stained, golden eyes glowing with both fury and desperation. Even if I hadn't known who she was, the way the soldiers fought to reach her while shouting her name gave it away. This was no ordinary noble. This was their Empress. And she was seconds away from being crushed. I sprinted, ignoring the shouts behind me. Humans don't overthink when someone's about to die. We move. My hands scrambled across the debris, trying to lift, shove, pull, anything. But the beam was twisted into the flooring, too heavy, too tangled. She hissed at me in her language, words I didn't understand but tone I didn't need translated. Anger at me for being there, maybe shame at being helpless. Her tail thrashed wildly, sleek and powerful, but caught in the wreckage. That was when instinct took over. I saw the thick band of debris pinning her tail, realized that freeing it would shift her enough to wriggle out. I didn't think about cultural significance or taboos. I just grabbed her tail with both hands and yanked as hard as I could. She made a sound that froze me for half a second. Not a scream, not pain. A sharp, startled moan that echoed in the chamber, even through the chaos. Her body jerked, her claws dug into the flooring, and with a surge, she slid free of the collapsing wreckage, tumbling against me in a heap of armored limbs and flowing hair. I didn't have time to process it. The ceiling groaned, I pulled her upright, and we staggered out of the chamber just as it caved in behind us. Dust rained down, alarms shifted pitch, and her guards finally burst through the smoke, weapons raised and eyes wide. They froze when they saw her leaning against me. Correction, clutching me. Both arms locked tight around my shoulders, tail coiled around my waist, golden eyes fixed on me with something that wasn't just gratitude. It was intensity, the kind that makes you feel like prey under a predator's gaze. Her guards looked horrified. One dropped to his knees, another muttered a word I'd later learn meant bound. They didn't rush to pull her away from me. They didn't berate me for touching her. They just stared, as if something irreversible had just happened. I tried to explain in English, babbling that she'd been stuck, that it was the only way, that anyone would have done the same. Judging by their expressions, I might as well have been barking. The Empress herself silenced them with a single command, her voice firm, low, and vibrating with authority. Then she turned to me, tilted her head, and said something I didn't understand. But the way she refused to let go, the way her grip tightened when a guard stepped forward, made the message clear. She wasn't leaving my side. We moved together through the wreckage. She insisted on staying pressed against me, her breathing steady but sharp, her tail still wound around my waist like a tether. Every few steps she glanced at me, unreadable expression flickering between curiosity and something fiercer. The guards kept their distance, exchanging uneasy looks, muttering under their breath. By the time we reached safer ground, word had already spread. Everywhere we went, alien soldiers and attendants froze, staring at us, at her, at me. Whispers chased us like shadows. Eyes widened when they saw her tail still looped possessively around me. Some bowed their heads. Others turned away, as if what they were witnessing was too scandalous to acknowledge. I didn't get it. All I knew was that I'd saved her life, and now I was stuck being dragged along by a ruler who wouldn't let me take a step without her. The smoke still clung to my lungs, my arms ached from hauling her out, and my brain couldn't process the weight of whatever cultural landmine I'd just detonated. But one phrase, muttered by more than one voice as we passed, seared itself into my memory. They said it in their language, but I caught the tone, the reverence, the fear. Later, I'd learned the translation. He touched the royal tail. It cannot be undone. At the time, I just thought I was in trouble for manhandling their Empress. Turns out, I had no idea what I'd actually done. The Empress refused to let go of me. I thought once we reached safety she'd step back, gather herself, return to her throne-like dignity. Instead, she stayed glued to me, tail still wrapped around my waist as though afraid I'd vanish if she loosened her grip. Her guards tried to guide her away, but she dismissed them with a flick of her hand and a glare that froze them in place. They obeyed, though unease rippled across their faces. I didn't speak their language, but I didn't need a translation to feel the tension. Every eye in that hall was locked on us, whispers swelling like a tide. They weren't whispering about the wreckage, or the fact she'd barely survived.
They were whispering about me.
A nobody human, an outsider. Someone who had broken a rule I hadn't even known existed. When we reached what looked like a medical chamber, attendants rushed forward with supplies. They didn't dare touch her while she clung to me. One tried, trembling hands outstretched with a cloth for her wounds, and she growled low in her throat until the poor creature backed away. Her golden eyes softened only when they turned to me, searching my face as though I held the answers to questions she hadn't voiced. I didn't even know what the hell those answers could be. Hours passed, and exhaustion sank in. I wanted a corner to sit in, space to breathe, maybe contact with my unit. But the Empress made it impossible. She sat beside me, pressed shoulder to shoulder, ignoring every attempt her people made to separate us. They brought her food. She insisted I eat first. They offered her water. She pushed it toward me before sipping herself. Every gesture, every glance, screamed a message I couldn't fully interpret, yet her people clearly did. Their discomfort deepened with every passing moment. Finally, one of her advisors stepped forward, an elder with silver streaks in his mane and a voice that carried authority. He bowed to her, then spoke firmly, gesturing toward me. His eyes narrowed like a blade aimed at my throat. She answered with words sharp as steel, a declaration that silenced the chamber. The advisor's ears flattened, his jaw tightened, but he retreated, defeated. Whatever he demanded, she had overruled him completely. That was when I started realizing this wasn't just some awkward cultural blunder. This was politics. This was power. And I was now tangled in it. Later, in a quieter chamber, a translator finally explained what had everyone so shaken. Tail contact wasn't casual. Among her people, the tail wasn't just anatomy, it was sacred. For a ruler, it symbolized lineage, sovereignty, and intimacy all at once. Touching it was an act bound to ceremony, a declaration of claim or recognition. To seize it in desperation and pull her free wasn't just saving her life. It was, by their laws and traditions, a binding. I laughed at first, shaking my head, thinking it absurd. But the translator didn't smile. His eyes carried pity, maybe fear, as he told me the truth. I had triggered something no one could reverse. To them, I had marked myself as hers. It explained the way she wouldn't leave me. The moan, the grip, the fierce refusal to let anyone separate us. It wasn't random. It was instinct, ritual buried deep in her people's history, and I had walked into it blindly. News spread fast. By the next day, everywhere I went, I felt the weight of stares. Soldiers stiffened, attendants bowed low, citizens gossiped in hushed voices when they thought I couldn't hear. Some looked at me with awe, as if fate had chosen me. Others glared with open hostility, seeing an intruder tainting their traditions. I hadn't asked for any of it, yet it clung to me like a second skin. The Empress, however, seemed perfectly content. If anything, she grew more possessive. She walked beside me in full regalia, ignoring the gasps of her court. She defended me when anyone dared question my presence. When one bold noble called me an insult in their tongue, she stepped forward and silenced him with a single word, her voice a whip crack. The noble dropped his gaze, tail flicking nervously, and retreated in disgrace. Her people tried different tactics. Diplomacy first. Advisors came with offers of wealth, transport, safe passage home, if I left quietly. When that failed, threats. Warnings that human involvement in royal affairs could spark unrest, maybe even war. I listened, uncomfortable but resolute. I hadn't chosen this, But I wasn't going to abandon the woman who had practically glued herself to my side. The Empress made sure I never could. Every attempt to push me away ended with her pulling closer. Every step I tried to take alone, she matched with stubborn determination. At night, when exhaustion pulled me down, she stayed near, as though guarding me instead of the other way around. Her people whispered about disgrace, about upheaval, about tradition shattered by a human hand. She ignored them all. Her gaze never wavered from me, as if daring anyone to challenge her choice. That choice wasn't mine.
Not yet.
But I could feel the walls closing in. The court simmered with resentment, the advisors fumed, and every move I made echoed louder than it should have. I was no longer just a human caught in the wrong place. I had become a symbol, a fracture line running straight through the Empire's heart. And I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The days that followed confirmed what I had suspected. My presence was no accident of survival but a catalyst that set the Empire on edge. Every corridor we walked carried whispers. Every council meeting ended in heated words the moment I appeared. The Empress seemed immune to the storm. She carried herself with calm certainty, always within arm's reach of me, her tail occasionally brushing against my side as if reminding me I couldn't escape even if I tried. Her people weren't so calm. Tension sharpened the air. Advisors huddled in secret. Nobles glared openly. Guards avoided eye contact. Some citizens bowed lower when they saw me. Others spat in my direction when they thought no one important was watching. The Empire was split, and I was the wedge that divided it. The first real test came, without warning. We were moving through a hall lined with statues when shadows detached from the pillars. Assassins, 3, maybe 4, moved fast, blades flashing. The guards reacted too slowly, caught off guard by attackers who knew exactly what they were doing. The Empress should have been the target, but their eyes flicked toward me first. Remove the outsider. Restore the order. That was their logic. Instinct carried me. I shoved her behind a fallen statue and grabbed the nearest thing at hand, a broken ceremonial staff from a display. It wasn't a weapon, but it was solid, and it was all I needed. Humans don't fight with grace. We fight with whatever works. I swung hard, cracked one assassin across the jaw, pivoted, and hurled the shaft like a spear at another. The guards rallied then, blades clashing, but I had already made my point. I didn't run. I didn't cower. I acted. The Empress's roar shook the chamber. Not fear, rage. She lunged into the fray, claws extended, striking down one attacker with terrifying precision. By the time it was over, blood stained the marble floor, 2 assassins lay dead, and the rest fled into the shadows. The guards regrouped, ashamed at their failure, but she didn't even glance at them. She went straight to me. Her hands gripped my shoulders, her golden eyes burning with something fiercer than before. She spoke in a tone that left no doubt. She wasn't asking if I was all right. She was declaring to the world that I was hers to protect as much as she was mine. And then she turned to the surviving guards and, in front of everyone, made a proclamation I couldn't fully understand but would later have translated. She named me her chosen protector, her consort, her bound mate. The chamber erupted. Some guards shouted in protest. Others dropped to their knees. The advisors who arrived moments later were pale with shock. One nearly fainted. The words spread fast, faster than the fire that had nearly taken her life days before. By sundown, every noble in the Empire knew what she had said, and by morning, every citizen whispered it in the markets. I had gone from accidental savior to official consort overnight. And it wasn't a title I could refuse. The pressure mounted quickly. The council summoned emergency meetings where I was not invited but certainly discussed. Assassins had failed, but politics was sharper than any blade. Delegates from rival houses demanded her decision be reversed, citing laws older than her throne. She dismissed them with icy words, stating that tradition had already been fulfilled when I touched her tail. Her people had no choice but to accept the bond or risk open rebellion against her reign. That didn't mean they accepted me. Nobles confronted me in private, veiled threats dripping from their polished speech. One told me accidents could happen even to those favored by the Empress. Another hinted that humans didn't last long in alien courts. They expected me to shrink, to yield, to prove myself unworthy. Instead, I listened, smiled, and walked away. Humans have a way of surviving by refusing to break under pressure. Their intimidation didn't work, because I'd grown up in a world where danger wasn't ceremonial, it was real, and you dealt with it or you died. The Empress seemed to know all of this without me saying a word. She shadowed me everywhere, sitting beside me during meals, sparring in the training grounds, even standing outside my quarters as though daring anyone to challenge her claim. When her people questioned the wisdom of her choice, she silenced them. When her nobles whispered, she stared them down until they choked on their words. I should have felt like a prisoner. Instead, I started feeling like a partner in a game I hadn't agreed to play but couldn't stop once it began. She didn't treat me as decoration. She asked my opinions, listened to my strange human solutions to problems, and laughed when I pointed out flaws no one else dared mention. The more time I spent near her, the more I realized she wasn't simply infatuated or bound by ritual. She was clever, decisive, and stubborn enough to bend a civilization if she had to. But beneath all that, there was something personal. When she looked at me, it wasn't just politics. It was need. Not weakness, but certainty. Like, she had spent her entire life waiting for someone who would do exactly what I had done without hesitation, pull her free when she was trapped, no matter the consequence. The Empire didn't care about the nuance. They saw disruption. They saw danger. And they were right in a way. My presence destabilized centuries of tradition. Every noble who thought they had a claim on her throne now saw me as a rival. Every soldier who bled for her wondered why a human had earned her side with a single reckless act. Every advisor feared what this meant for alliances and treaties balanced on fragile lines. Tensions swelled like a storm ready to break. The first assassination attempt had been bold but clumsy. The next one would not be. I knew it. She knew it. Her people knew it. Which meant that whatever came next would determine more than just our bond. It would decide whether her empire fractured around us or reshaped itself because of us. And for reasons I couldn't yet explain, I found myself determined not to let it fracture. The storm finally broke. It happened during what was meant to be a formal gathering, a show of stability to quiet the unrest that had been spreading through the empire. Nobles lined the hall, soldiers stood at rigid attention, advisors flanked the throne with eyes sharp as blades. I was there because she refused to let me be anywhere else. To her, I wasn't a guest or an accessory. I was part of the foundation she was building, whether her people liked it or not. The attack came with precision this time. Not shadows slipping through corridors, but a full coup staged in broad daylight. A faction of nobles, backed by their private soldiers, stormed the hall with weapons raised and voices thundering that the Empress had broken sacred law, that the Empire needed a ruler untainted by foreign hands. The air cracked with the sound of steel drawn, the clash of loyalties ripping the chamber apart. For a heartbeat, it looked like the Empress stood alone. Half the guards hesitated, caught between duty to their ruler and fear of betraying tradition. The nobles who had plotted this had chosen their moment well. And yet, she didn't waver. Her tail lashed once behind her, her voice rang out with words I couldn't understand but could feel down to my bones. Defiance, unshaken authority, and a declaration that she would not yield. They came for her anyway. Humans aren't built to match alien warriors in strength, but we're built to improvise. While blades clashed around me, I spotted a weak point in the hall's towering structure, decorative chains holding massive banners above the dais. I grabbed a fallen pike, hooked it through one chain, and yanked with everything I had. The banners crashed down, smothering two attackers, tangling weapons, throwing the fight into chaos. Guards loyal to her surged forward, rallying behind the sudden shift. The Empress fought like fire itself, her claws flashing, her voice cutting through the roar. And when one noble broke through the line, charging directly at her with murder in his eyes, I didn't think. I moved. A broken fragment of stone in my hand became a weapon as I slammed it into his skull before he could strike. He fell at her feet, and the hall went still. The silence that followed was heavier than the fight itself. All eyes turned to us, her standing tall, unbowed, golden eyes burning, me at her side, breath ragged, blood streaking my arms, stone fragment still in hand. The nobles who had plotted the coup realized their mistake too late. She raised her chin, pointed to them with a clawed hand, and issued a command. Soldiers seized them one by one, dragging them away to face judgment. When the chamber was clear, she didn't sit back on her throne. Instead, she took my hand in hers and raised it high before the assembly. Her voice filled the hall, words echoing with power. The translator later told me what she said, but I didn't need the words in that moment to know. She wasn't just defending me. She was declaring me chosen, not by accident, not by ritual, but by her will. The court had no choice. They bowed, some reluctantly, others with genuine reverence. The empire had been forced to witness a truth they couldn't deny. I wasn't a weakness to her reign. I was part of it. Later, in the quiet that followed, I finally spoke the words I had been holding back since the beginning. I told her I never asked for any of this, never wanted to be tangled in rituals and politics I barely understood. I told her I was just a human who saw someone trapped and did what instinct demanded. She listened without interruption, her golden eyes steady on mine. Then she answered softly, in broken fragments of my language she had picked up. You pulled. You saved. You stayed. Choice. It was simple, but it cut deeper than any elaborate speech. To her, it wasn't about destiny or laws. It was about action, about the fact that I had chosen, again and again, to stand by her side when I could have walked away. The realization settled over me like a weight lifting rather than pressing down. I could leave. They'd probably let me, eventually, if I pushed hard enough. But I didn't want to. Not because of ritual, not because of titles, but because she had shown me something rare. Loyalty matched with loyalty, fire matched with fire. And maybe, just maybe, the empire could use a little human stubbornness in its veins. So I stayed. Acceptance didn't come easily. Nobles still muttered, advisors still schemed, and every step forward was a battle. But battles are what humans understand. The Empress walked at my side, never once loosening her grip, and together we carved a path through the resistance. Her people adjusted, slowly, reluctantly, until the whispers changed tone. Awe replaced fear, respect edged out scorn. Not everyone, not all at once, but enough that the empire held together. I wasn't her prisoner. I wasn't her accident. I was her choice, and she was mine. And in the end, when the dust of rebellion settled and the court bowed once more, I couldn't help but laugh quietly to myself. Out of all the ways my life could have ended, it began again with something so absurdly simple. All I did was pull her tail. Now I had an empress who refused to stop following me. Figures.